6:01, we're going to go ahead and start. I know a couple people may be coming late, but we got to get started. We got a very full agenda tonight. So the meeting is called to order. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Rector, Store,
He's here. I don't know where he went.
Summers,
Present.
Taylor, Thorsland,
Here.
Tinsley, Bachaspati, Woken, Young,
Here.
Clemens, Clifford, Cowart, Eisenman, Esri,
Here.
Furtado, Goss, Harper, Ingram, King Taylor, McGuire, Patterson,
Here.
Rosales.
Here.
Oh, more people are arriving like crazy. Okay.
Okay.
Lorraine? We'll say Coward again. Do you want the names or do you know who these people are?
No, I know who they are,
Okay.
but thank you.
Would the clerk read the notice of the meeting, please?
Notice is hereby given that a study session of the County Board, Champaign County, Illinois, will convene on May 28, 2019, 6 p.m. in the Lyle Shields Meeting Room, Brookins Administrative Center, 1776 East Washington Street, Urbana, Illinois.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, we only have 10 members here, which is actually not a quorum, but we're not voting on anything, so we will continue forward. Do we have anybody tonight that would like to do public participation? Oh, sorry. We can't really move the agenda because there's not a quorum. Sorry. Okay. Seeing no public participation, we will move forward. I would like to introduce to you this evening Susan Petrie, who is a longtime resident of Champaign County. She attended the U of I many years ago. I won't say how many. She is retired from the Rural Development Area Director, Department of Agriculture, and she works out of Champaign, Urbana, so for a large district. But she is our facilitator for this evening. Her job is to keep you guys moving because we have a lot of subjects to cover tonight, and we're trying to generate sort of some information and a long list of things that we need to consider in the strategic plan that have been brought up by both you guys in previous meetings and also department heads when I've been speaking with them and getting information from them, and then a few from the public as well. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Susan, and she will take you through the 3 topics for tonight, which are county revenue, county infrastructure, and county workforce. Thanks, Susan.
Good evening to you all. I'm sorry that I don't know all of your names, so I may have to point at people if I come down to it. The first speaker that we're going to have tonight is Laurel Pressing. She's the county treasurer, and she'll be going through revenue with us.
I'm also your friendly county collector. You'll be getting your property tax bills in a mailbox near you, probably by the end of this week. Okay, I was asked to talk about revenue, and I sent you all a little report on the major sources of revenue that we have. And we've not been doing that well on sales taxes because I think a lot of people are buying things on the internet. And so our quarter-cent sales tax, which is a $5.9 million budget item, is down by 1% compared with the same period last year, and that is the first 5 months of this calendar year. And the public safety sales tax, which is budgeted at almost $5 million, is down 0.3%. The income tax, which is budgeted at $3 million, is doing very well. It's 17% higher than it was for the same period last year. The 1 cent sales tax at $1.5 million is down 1%, And the use tax, which is .9 million, is up 17%. So if you take all those different sources, we're slightly ahead. But as I said, we're not doing that well on sales tax, and that's not a good sign. You gotta have a question?
Yeah, when we collect sales tax revenue that we're allowed to collect under Wayfair, does that go under sales tax or use tax?
I think it goes under use tax. Yeah. Right. But I think that overall, we're still not doing that well because our sales taxes are a huge source of our revenue. State shared revenue is major. It's bigger than our property tax. It's about 13 million compared to 12 million on property tax. Right, but overall, if you look at it, it's a trade-off. Okay. So one comment I have is that I believe on a budget basis, we should be including January and February revenues in the budget, and they've been moved to the previous year. I don't think that's gives you a very realistic picture of what's going on, because it looks like you get a lot of money in December and no money in January and February. So I have a lot of recommendations for budget balancing, but I guess that would be for another day, because you just want me to talk about revenue today, right? Okay. Does anybody have a question for me? No questions. Okay. Thank you very much. And if anybody thinks of something, just give me a call or send me an email. I'd be happy to talk with you.
Okay, so what you're trying to come up with is topics that you're going to be interested in that you'll need when you get ready to do your next plan. And so what she spoke about was sales tax. And up here on the, if you can see the chart over to the side, those are some other issues that you may be interested in that have been brought up. Would you like me to read what's on the chart? I don't know if everybody can see it. You can't see it? Okay. Okay, what we've got is property taxes, sales taxes, fees and fines, grants, reducing costs, interest income, restructuring debt, and the motor fuel tax. So those are some topics that have been brought up that you'll be considering. Are there other topics or questions that you might have for Ms. Pressing?
I would like to say that we're getting about twice as much on interest income as we did for the same period last year. And that's in the general fund, even though the fund balance is way down. I just said the interest is higher. We've been trying to really make sure that we invest every spare dollar, but we have to keep enough money to pay the bills. But if you look at how we've done compared to last year, interest income is almost twice as high in the general fund, even though the general fund's money is lower than it was last year. I would like to talk at some point about where you can make cuts on spending, because the city of Urbana and the county have very similar revenue and expenditure issues, and the city of Urbana did very well on saving on health insurance. And also, I think a joint problem for the cities and the county is the increasing cost of 911 systems. I think we need a sustainable revenue source for that. And what we have is what was voted in by our voters in 1998, which is $1.50 for every phone. So you can't really finance anything in government if you're going to keep a fixed fee for over 20 years. It just doesn't work out too well. So I think we need a sustainable funding for MetCAD, and I would think that the best way to do it would be a % of the phone bill, and that would require going to the legislature and changing the way we finance 911. But we have to work with other counties and with the cities, and I think that needs to be done.
You said this is METCAD, M-E-T-C?
MetCAD, M-E-T-C-A-D, it's Metropolitan
Just CAD, okay.
Computer Aided Dispatch. Yes.
I had a real brief question for you, Laura. How much revenue, since we are talking about revenue, how much revenue are we losing for the TIF districts? One, how many TIF districts do we have? And how much are we losing because of those TIF districts? I know
I'd have
Urbana
to-
has one, and I know Rantoul.
I didn't look that up, but I can look it up and send you an email, okay?
Okay, and the duration of those TIF districts? I know that
Okay.
some of them are for 10 years.
I haven't really gone into TIF
Okay.
districts. It's been hard enough to learn my job as treasurer, but that's part of it, so I will look at that.
Okay,
So thanks
great.
for raising the issue. Chris?
Could you talk a little bit about changes in property tax? Is it, and are we seeing an increase in property tax throughout the, property values throughout the county, or some areas?
I haven't looked
falling.
at the actual assessments, but the tax rates went down throughout the county, except for Allerton, which I think they had a new levy. But that was because the county doesn't levy for the nursing home anymore. We paid off the nursing home bonds. So the property values have been going up, so it just depends on your individual property, what your assessment did. But in general, all the rates went down throughout the county except for Allerton. Slightly down, not dramatically down. Okay, if you think of something else, just send me an email or call me. I'd be happy to talk with you. Thanks.
Kyle and I were just kind of talking about this, the Metcad phone,
Mhm.
and this is the 1998 $1.50 that got banked down to, what is it, 89 cents? now or something.
87 cents, I think it
What,
was.
how is, I know I pay a fee for my handy,
Mhm.
and, but does the county see any of that revenue, or is there a difference
That
for
goes-
cell phone fee?
That goes to Metcad. But
directly?
Metcad is financed in addition by direct payments from the cities and the county.
On the
Because
hard lines.
the phone fee is not high enough to pay the cost of Metcad. And as that static fee stays there, and it even, as you said, got dropped down to 89 cents, for a while, that means that the share that the cities and the county have to pick up gets bigger and bigger every year. And we had a tremendous increase for Metcad. Back in 1998, it was $200,000 from the county, and by 2019, it is $689,000.
Yeah, that's a big jump. And I think that when we did the Metcad tour, they also talked about how the fee had gone.
No, when
down.
it was first introduced, 911 was a new thing, and so voters had to vote on it, and it passed. But then to keep it at a flat rate for 20 years is just not going to work. So that's why we need to go to the legislature and get this fixed. And I hope you have a legislative committee. I'd like to talk with your legislative committee, and we could work with the cities on this because it affects all of us. Yes?
You're recommending this $1.50 per telephone landline. Is there any kind of idea of how much that would even be? I mean, I honestly don't know anybody that has a landline anymore.
No,
So,
that's on every phone. It's $1.50 on every phone. But that's the same thing that our voters approved in 1998. So that's why you can't keep it fixed for 20 or 30 years and expect to be able to pay for the services. So that's why the county has to chip in more and more every year, and the cities as well. So I would rather see it be a percentage, because then it could keep up with inflation. And I thought 2% would be a reasonable number, but that requires going to the legislature. And to get something done, we would have to work with other counties and cities. But I think 911 is certainly something that's well accepted now. You can't really survive without it. So I think we need to be able to have sustainable funding for it. Yes.
Well, I guess one way to look at it is there's like 200,000 people in Champaign County, so everyone's paying about $3.50 per year for the Metcad system in addition to I guess it's $1.50 per month.
Well, you're just talking about the
The
county.
county
The
contribution.
cities
Yeah,
and
sure,
everybody.
sure.
So it's a lot more than that. That's
Right.
just the county share.
Okay. Okay. I guess what's driving the costs at MetCat? MetCat, and this is sort of a fundamental question. MetCat is a private company. It's a
MetCat is a government agency which is paid for by the cities and the county.
Okay.
And the university contributes also.
Okay. So I mean,
And
what's
plus the phone fee.
right? So what's driving costs at MetCat?
There's just general inflation.
Okay.
They have to pay more for wages. They have to get new equipment because these things get outdated. You know, telecommunications is constantly changing.
Right.
So they have very large capital outlays that have to be done every few years.
Right.
So that's what's driving it. Okay, thank you very much.
There's no other questions for her? Okay. We'll move on to our next topic then. And just to let you know, now we're ahead of schedule, which doesn't mean the next other speakers have more time. The next thing we're going to move on to is the county infrastructure. And the first person that we're going to be hearing from is Ben Trove, and he is the president of the Illinois Economic Consulting. He's a senior at U of I in economics, and he'll be talking to us about the cost-benefit analysis and costs and deferring. Welcome, Ben.
All right, thank you. I believe everybody was provided a sheet of paper. It's a spreadsheet. It's got a lot of numbers on it, a lot of cool colors and everything like that. That is what I'll primarily be talking about today as far as building maintenance is concerned. So, infrastructure in this county, one of the big problems that we have noticed is we are spending a lot of money on building maintenance and building repairs for all the facilities that the county owns. Things like the jail, the nursing home before it was sold, and things like that. So, to kind of more get these costs under control a bit more and kind of quantify some unquantifiable data points, we decided to do a cost-benefit analysis of what we're currently doing with infrastructure as far as building maintenance is concerned. So we split costs up into two primary categories. They are what we called hard costs and soft costs. So the hard costs are things like how much is it going to cost to fix a window pane, for instance, or how much is it going to cost to fix a door, right? These kinds of hard damages that we can tangibly see when we go into a property. Those are summarized on the left side of your paper, and we have organized them by building as well. This data comes from a 2015 report that I believe is on the county's website for building maintenance. It was a presentation put together by an architectural firm some years ago, and that's where those numbers come from. Now, on the right side of your paper, we have what we call the soft costs. So these are things like spillover costs, which, for an example, would be we've got a busted water line, and that's causing mold damage. So if we let that continue each year, what is that additional cost of that mold damage that keeps building up and building up? We also have productivity costs. So in buildings that have poor insulation, employees, they don't work as efficiently and you're losing money because of that. And we have a couple of other intangible costs on that side as well. We tallied everything up, ran the numbers, and you should see a cost estimate on the very far right side of your sheet of paper there. That range is what we estimate the county would need to spend in a given year in order to just keep the facilities where they're at right now as far as condition is concerned. So that's, not improving anything, but making sure that the next year things aren't any worse than they are this year. And then just for fun, at the bottom of your page, you should see this really long decimal number. And that's basically just an average for if you wanted to keep a building that the county owns longer than 14.7 years, it would actually be more cost effective to fix everything right now than just doing the bare minimum every year, just doing those, very basic repairs. So we estimate the average building, if you're planning on keeping it longer than 14.7 years, it would be more cost effective to just fix everything outright right now. This doesn't account for borrowing costs. You know, if we needed to borrow money to help with some of these repairs, it doesn't account for that necessarily, just because you know, interest rates are so everywhere all the time. So we kind of had trouble pinning that down. But this is just a general estimate of what we think the actual costs of building maintenance for all the facilities in this county are every year. So with that, I guess I can open up for questions if you would like.
Up here, up front, we have another sheet of paper with some infrastructure issues. So I will read those. In addition to what Ben talked about, which was the deferred maintenance plan, well, I guess I should wait and ask. Does anybody have any questions for him before I go through this list? I'm sorry.
I mean, what's the variance in this 14.7 number between buildings? You know, are there some buildings that, you know, there's not much stuff we need to fix and the break-even time is 50 years, and some there's, you know, the break-even time is 2 years.
Yeah, no, that's exactly correct. That's just an average. That's just, we have all the values, so all the numbers, all the costs, and then we just averaged it out like that. So there are some buildings, obviously, that are in better condition than others. So that break-even time would be longer.
I guess what's the shortest break-even time?
I believe it was, well, it's for some of the buildings that aren't currently in use right now, the ones that don't have staff, you know, working in them. But I believe it was somewhere between 2 and 5 years. So it's definitely a very short time frame on that. So yeah, those buildings usually have very high damages, but those damages have also really high spillover costs as well. So each year it's just going to exponentially grow. So that's why they have a shorter length. Yeah.
Does this chart also include buildings that need to be demolished? Because I believe when we did that assessment, we put buildings in different categories: good condition, fair condition, need heavily repaired, need to be demolished.
Yes.
So if those that need to be demolished are also included in the cost estimates of how much would it take, like the old nursing home near Elias, you know.
Yeah, so this report doesn't account for demolishing. This is just if you wanted to keep every building that's currently in your possession and just keep it at the condition it is right now. I didn't see that particular, you know, aspect of the report, but I would imagine that would change the numbers just a little bit. Obviously, if you demolish a building, you won't have to keep up maintenance on it every year. But no, this report does not include those figures in particular.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Sure.
Eric, on that thread, and to sort of expand on what Geraldo was talking about, we have buildings like the downtown jail, sheriff office. What I'd like to see maybe is a number associated with, if we just decided, you know, to stop maintaining it, find places to put the people that are in that building, and take that building down, there's going to be a cost associated with that.
Right.
What does that do to the equation overall? Does it pay to take the building away, even though there's a high initial cost, because there's zero after that for maintenance, or some trickle to zero pretty quickly? And what does that gain us over this average of 14.7 years? Do we develop a fund that can be used proactively to do other work? That would be very interesting to me for a couple of these old buildings.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could answer that right now necessarily. It depends on the building,
Yeah.
of course, and what the condition is and how much it would cost to demolish and everything like that. But I will say, going along those lines, there's definitely the consideration of, well, if we have to move those employees out, we have to move them somewhere. So then there's a crowding aspect, which would be a cost in and of itself, right? If you
Right.
crowd a lot of employees in one space. So there would be some hidden costs in there as well, but that could be something we can look further into, if that was an option, or if that was a, like a general way.
I think that will become something that we'll have to know the numbers.
Right, of
fairly
course.
soon.
Sure.
Thanks.
Sure.
I have another one for you.
Sure.
Perhaps Dana could probably embellish. We also did a green assessment of all of our buildings
Yes.
where we were changing incandescent lights and fluorescent lights to LED. We were changing thermostats and taking an assessment of weatherization and trying to get the certification for green buildings. How many green buildings are these buildings that are here? How many of those do we have? And how much would it take to bring them up to par if they're not part of that green equation?
So as far as that is concerned, I don't actually know how many buildings right now are that green certified, but I do know just from looking at some other studies done in other counties and these similar initiatives that those programs usually have really high startup costs. So like the actual installation and the switching over from what you used to have to this new green technology has really high startup costs. But in the long run, certainly past this 14.7-year horizon, your costs are significantly lowered from these initiatives. So it could be an avenue that actually we would suggest the county should pursue if it's feasible. But yeah, for instance, Cook County has done something very similar where they have been converting their buildings, and they have found that in recent years their costs, yearly costs that is, for upkeep and utilities have drastically lowered. So if you're looking for long-term cost reduction, we believe, my organization believes that could be an avenue that would be very beneficial to pursue. But to answer the first part again, I don't know how many are currently at that point right now.
Dana will be speaking with us next, so he can go into more detail.
Thank you for your answer.
Sure.
There any other questions for Ben?
I'm curious about the Ailee's original building and the Ailee's Training Center having the same annual cost to maintain. And that's pretty good, pretty remarkable to have exactly the same amount. Question for Geraldo, is the original building the one that we're thinking of demolishing?
I believe there's an attachment to it, and then that slowly but surely has been downsized because the asbestos and contaminants that are inside. I believe Elias used to use it for training, but some of that has been blocked away and sealed. And we've also demolished certain parts of it too as well. But there are still, I believe, phone lines and IT lines connecting this building with that building that are underground, and we can't just cut those off and leave it that way. So we haven't totally began the demolition project because there are other contingencies in tearing up that building in order for us to keep the MedCat building and Elias in operation. And you could correct me, Dana, if I'm wrong. Thank you.
If there's nothing else, then we'll introduce Dana. Thank
right.
you, Ben.
Thank you.
I apologize. My allergies are bad today, so try not to cough. What I handed out was a document that was put together in 2016 based off of the 2015, 2016 facility analysis that was done. I give that to you as reading material. It's got a lot of great information about our facilities, our needs. It also ties in IT and gets into ways to hopefully generate some income. This was based off of concept of going after 25-cent sales tax referendum here in the county that failed. But I think it's an important document, and I really urge you to take a look at it. It's posted on the website under facilities, along with our facility analysis. So if you get a chance to take a look at it, it'll take you 20 minutes to read through it, but again, it's got great information. Darlene handed out, when she gave her report to the full board, our capital campaign plan. That takes us through FY 2029. Reminder that since about 2014, for 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18, the county was putting in to capital asset fund about $500,000. That is a significant increase to what the county was doing prior to 2013, which was nothing. Unfortunately, they could not fund it. And that's why we're at where we're at today with our facilities. We've been able to maintain them, as the young man spoke earlier, basically just keeping them afloat. These projects that we've had for the last 5 or 6 years have really been able to assist us in upgrading, saving some utilities, ensuring the building envelope is secure for the next 20, 30 years at least, with some of the projects that have been ongoing. I bring up the facility capital plan. Just as a reminder, this year we increased that $500,000 support to a little over $1 million. And the next 10 years, that goes up to $2 million a year. And right now, I know that there's not funding available for that additional $1 million. This is all predicated off of the assessment, building assessment, that was compiled. Our costs have been brought up to date in terms of, this is 2019, and the assessment was done back in 2015. So we have used multipliers to increase our costs. So that is a huge issue and concern for my staff, where we're at with the buildings and how it gets funded. I know that you folks are talking about it. I know the facility committee is talking about it and trying to address it too. So we appreciate your assistance. A couple of questions I think that came up. Geraldo, you were asking about green. We have 0 buildings that are green. They were never funded to be green. LEED technology or LEED concept, wasn't around, I don't believe, or at least maybe in infancy, when the last building was built, which is the courthouse. What we have done with lighting and so forth, we've gone through, replaced all our 24-hour fluorescent tubes with LEDs. That saves dollars. We've replaced any fluorescent tube that you really need a ladder for beyond 8 feet with the LED. We'll continue to do that within our operational funds per each building. Love to be able to take out all the fluorescent tubes and put in LED, but right now it's cost prohibitive. We don't have the funding to be able to do that. We try and keep our plumbing working, building envelope secure, windows in good shape, roofs in good shape. So we just have not had the funds to be able to do that. Also would love to be able to take the majority of our buildings from pneumatic controls, which is a wall thermostat that's basically operational at the same temperature 24/7 unless somebody sets it back, to digital controls, which then you can manipulate. You can turn down your temperatures after 5 o'clock. You can bring them back up at 6:30, 7 o'clock, depending upon what season we're in with Mother Nature here. So those are great ways to save dollars. Those are green initiatives. There's other initiatives as you look at plans for the future, whether it's, solar. Probably don't have a large enough roof in a county that would run an entire building, but it certainly would help. We do have property around our East Campus, which we could look at for solar packs and putting out there to help reduce our electric costs for the county. We'll take a look at all of that. It all has a cost impact. Some of the other larger issues that we have to be confronted with here in the near future is the downtown jail. We are barely funding it at a level to keep it afloat. Had some unexpected costs last year with the generator. We've got inmates that are in the facility. It's a 24-hour facility. Got to be able to run your HVAC, your lighting, your doors, all of those needs. That was an unexpected cost last year, but we were able to fund it out of savings and capital asset fund. Hope there are no weathers this upcoming year, but in reality, the next 3 years, we could be replacing some components to HVC. We'll just have to wait and see how that goes, but we are in desperate need of getting out of that building, both with inmates and with the sheriff's staff. The building is really bringing us down in terms of a financial hole if we have to sink a lot of dollars in there in the future. So, any questions? Kyle, go ahead.
Some solar panels out there.
I'm sorry?
Put some solar panels out there.
You could, except for a little bit of shade over here, but yeah, we could put something out there.
Have we ever used that area for anything?
No. There's a couple of picnic tables over in the far corner over there. Staff use it during the summer, the nice months. We've got a fake owl and a fake coyote out there to try to keep the goose population out. They have a tendency to want to come in here and raise little ones. But no, it's not really been used. It was used, this building was originally a junior high school, and it was used kind of as a play area. What I hear from a couple of my friends who actually went to junior high here. So, but this is another building that it was great for the county when they purchased it. I want to say back in 95, 96, and they put $1 million or so into retrofitting, and RPC helped them with a loan to retrofit their area. But the building it's 93,000 square feet. You probably have 20% of it in hallways. It's poorly conceived. There's a lot of extra space that's not necessary for offices. There is no insulation in these walls. It's a brick exterior. It's got one little piece that might have an R6 or 7 value. There's no insulation up above the ceiling and the roof deck. This is a building that, if you really looked at for the future, would you stay in it for 15 or 20 years? A lot of our business is done downtown around the courthouse environment. It makes sense that maybe the county eventually is down that area at some point. If we were able to do that, it would be a way to save future investment dollars here, capital dollars for this building. There's quite a bit of property that goes around the facility. It's currently used, most of it's used for soccer fields and athletic events by Urbana Park District, but we have an agreement with them for that. But it could be used for other things if the county so wished to, try and sell it at some point in the future, just as a thought. So, somebody else had a question?
I was curious about the figures that Ben, I didn't quite catch your last name, provided for the Sheriff Correctional Center, about $353,000 annually to maintain. That doesn't is that about right, what it costs, or is that,
Well,
does that include, emergency
My budget to
repairs?
take care of that building on an annual basis is $47,650. Now, I've not seen or heard his presentation before, but I'm assuming that he got his numbers from the study that was put together. And so I'm guessing that that's if you divided it over X number of years, that's a cost for deferred maintenance backlog spread over the 15-year or 20-year period, whatever point of time that they used as a reference point. I didn't catch that in his discussion.
He was nodding ahead in agreement with you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you very much for your time.
You want to read through what's on your list? I can't quite
Well,
see it from here.
we had one more speaker that was going to
Okay.
be talking about IT, and so after they're done, then I'll go through the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina.
Thank you.
The next person to speak with us this evening is Andy Rhodes, who is the IT director.
Hello, how are you guys tonight? This is a document I put together for Darlene for the executive report. Most of you are familiar with a lot of this stuff. It just highlights the systems that we're working on and how old they are, which ones are in the process of being replaced, which ones really need to be looked at, and which ones are on the horizon later on. I don't really have anything to highlight on this. I mean, this is stuff we've talked about over the years many, many times. So I'm here to answer any questions you guys may have. Pranjal?
Yeah, I guess one thing I sort of noticed is that we're sort of moving more from internal in-house developed applications to vendor supplied applications.
Correct.
Do you think that's, I mean, I sort of understand the motivations for that move. Do you think that's what we want to do for basically all our systems if we could ideally?
Yeah, I do. Back when our IT department was established in the 70s and 80s, of course, there weren't any programs available. Generally, what you did is bought a mid-range IBM type server and then had programming staff that wrote custom programs for your environment. We've lived in that environment, you know, up until recently when we have gotten to the point where we can't find programmers who are competent in the programming languages that we're using, which are also no longer taught. So we're starting to move off to vendor-supported systems. It's also been recommended by the outside auditor and then also by the Maximus Group, who did a technology assessment in 2007, that we go in that direction as well. And, you know, for a county our size, you can basically find a package, a vendor-driven package for every function that we do.
And I guess how does it, I mean, I assume that's going to increase our costs, but about how much?
Well, a couple of examples that we've had in the last few years. When we replaced the court system and the jail system that we had 2 programmers devoted to, they were making about $60,000 a year at that time, so $120,000 a year. The maintenance on the software that we purchased in 2003 is about $200,000 a year. Similarly, with the tax program that we just recently purchased, we had one guy doing that, making about 65 plus benefits, and that is going to cost us about 110, 115 when all said and done per year. But you get the backing of an entire organization, and you get, you know, frequent updates. Security's better.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the fully loaded cost, it's less more than I thought it would be. You know.
Waldo?
Somebody had laughed at me the other day when I said our IT, some of our IT software is over 40 years old, and
That's
they
correct.
laughed at me.
Yeah.
But I see here that you have 1980.
Yep,
So
that's
to
correct.
2019 is about 39 years, so
Yeah.
I'm mistaken, it's not 40.
Well,
It's
it's actually
39.
the accounting system is. The accounting system was purchased when we got either a System 36 or a System 38 mid-range computer from IBM. It was included with the system, and so we've heavily modified it since we got it in the mid-70s.
Is the recorder of deeds the only one that's using this type of software, or is there anything similar in other departments that are that old?
Well, the recorder's not using anything that's old. They moved on to a vendor. They were like the first department to move into a vendor-driven system when they got the records management system that they're still utilizing. And it's been through numerous upgrades over the years, all paid for through the Recorder's Automation Fund. But some of the other departments are still stuck on the AS400 too, like animal control. We've got a module that we developed for animal control that is something that we need to look at replacing. It's 30 or 40 years old. The real estate system that we're currently implementing replaces a system that's 30 or 40 years old. The accounting system, of course, is something we're going to be working on next year, is 40 or 50 years old.
And I do remember and do recall in my last 11 years that every year you come in front of this legislative body and request inadequate funding so you could update a lot of this antiquated equipment, and you have been denied in the past.
I wouldn't say it's been denied. You guys have spending priorities. You know, we all realize that you guys have spending priorities. It's a situation where we've been able to keep things going, but stuff is fast approaching the end of our ability to keep it going.
Thank you, Andy.
And it's mainly because of the age of the software. It's just not, you just can't find people who can write it. Chris?
Thank you, sir. I've asked this before, but we have some new members. The AS400 is about how old, and how old is that system?
The current one that we have?
Yes, sir.
It's 3 years old.
Oh.
So we purchased it in we leased it in 2016. The lease is up for renewal in 2020. We replace it every 4 or 5 years. IBM generally stops providing support for it, and at that time we have to replace it. So we're on like a 4 or 5 year replacement schedule for it.
Okay. Is that a pretty secure platform?
The AS400, absolutely. It's a rock. There's not a lot of instances of hacking into it. There's not a lot of people who spend time writing viruses for it. It's a good, solid platform. That about the only time it ever goes down is when we take it down to apply software patches or hardware maintenance to it. We're all in IT. We're all kind of sad to see it go, because it's just something that you can turn on in the corner and forget about. But there are definite limitations to what can be done on it. But for the foreseeable future, we'll always have an AS400 because the court's case management system runs on it. So the county will have an AS400 for the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
Pranjal?
Yeah, last time you spoke to us, you said that you were getting like a 24/7 security.
Correct.
Did that happen?
Yep, yep. We contract with Arctic Wolf, and they've done a superior job for us. In December, when RPC had an Emotet outbreak, even though RPC is not covered under our contract with Arctic Wolf, they were very helpful to us in identifying infected computers at RPC so that we could help them remediate the infection they had.
If there's no further questions for him right now, I might direct you to the paper that's up front that talks about infrastructure. A lot of this was touched on, maybe not directly using the words, but we did talk about sustainable energy. We talked very briefly about the county office location, jail consolidation and deferred maintenance plan in the facilities. With the IT, some of the suggestions that have been brought up that need to be considered are cloud storage, paperless processes, and IT maintenance plan and upgrade. So we kind of talked a little bit about the plan, the upgrades happen if the money's available. Does anyone have any questions on any of those topics or anything further to add to our list?
Do we have a sort of a disaster backup that's separate from document storage?
Well, we currently have an offsite backup for the AS400 that's in Oak Brook, and we port the data to that in real time. That handles the courts and the jail management system that we currently have. The new jail management system is going to be a cloud-based product from Tyler, so they'll handle all the disaster recovery and high availability for that system. The Kronos timekeeping system that we're moving to is also cloud-based, so payroll and HR and timekeeping will all be in the cloud, so that'll be covered. The DevNet system for real estate, we have a backup server that's going to be located at the courthouse, and those two servers are going to replicate back and forth to each other. The GIS systems, we've been looking at backing those up to Azure, but we haven't made much progress on that, mainly because we keep getting pulled into other things and it just keeps sucking our time away.
What is Azure?
It's Microsoft's cloud.
Yeah, sorry. I just had one other question come up, which is, I know the clerk has an IT person. Do the other departments have their own IT departments separate?
There's one other IT person in the county other than the one in the clerk's office, and that's the one in the circuit clerk's office. He basically operates the court's case management system for them, for all the offices at the courthouse.
If there's no further questions, then we can move on to the next speaker. Thank you very much. Our next presentation is going to be given by another consultant from the Illinois Economic Consulting Group. His name is Eduardo Moreno, and he's going to be talking to us about the cost benefit of staffing practices.
Hello, son. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I believe there is another paper that has a lot of spreadsheet analysis on it, and it comes with 2v1. Yes, that one. That one right there. And I'll be speaking about the turnover rates of the Champaign County. And so we decided to do a very different set of separating it into two main sets. So we first decided to look at all the full-time employees, and we decided to limit the range of how many years that each employee has worked to about 4 years. And then we kind of did an average on for every employee that worked there for each course that they worked in. For example, if they were a public defender, we averaged up all in from 0 to 4 years, all the years they had there. And one of the first tables that we have here is a set average on the amount of years before a employee leaves the county office. And so when we looked upon that, we put on the secondary portion of, we looked at the termination causes. Why did they leave their position in the first place? There was one main culprit that was the much greater than all the other causes, which was resignation, which here out of the 754 like applicants that left the county, 517 left through resignation, or 68% of the total those that left on that part. So once they resignated, that means they left on their own terms. They left for a multitude of reasons. It could either be leaving for a better occupation at another location, maybe leave from the public sector to private. And when we looked at the most common ones that have the most amount of resignation, we specified 5 specific positions, which are the legal clerk, assistant public defenders, deputy sheriff of corrections, court service officer, and master control officers. Those have the highest amount of resignations out of all the other positions in the county payroll. So when we started to look more in depth on the amount of the annual pay that they paid in the hourly wage, and we decided to do a more in-depth look onto their onboarding, which is their time for them to get trained. And these positions that were specified are mainly more highly skilled or a lot more technical reasons. So training would take a while in order to get them to the necessary amount of time for them to become a productive member in their team that they have there. So when we looked upon that, we gave an assumption that the training for their position would take roughly around a month or so in order to become fully they understand their position correctly and they can perform at a efficient amount of work for the amount of hours that they put in their position. So when we looked at that, we decided to basically think of a 1 month salary of how much they're getting paid into accounts of how much it would be for onboarding for that role. So an example would be the legal secretary would be money spent on onboarding for the first month would be around $2,633.92. That's only for that role for one employee on that part, and you multiply by the amount of employees in that role themselves. So with this part, we looked at what Champaign has, and we compared these numbers with the average there in the state of Illinois in order to see how it is in other counties. So when we looked at that part, we see that it's the amount the same that they have there for an entire annually. So the cost between the two, when we look at annually, when we multiply by 1 month by 12 months in a year, we see that they have very similar amounts, but we're actually under what the Illinois usually pays for each onboarding, for each position. And when we take a lot more in depth, we assume that when we are assuming onboarding, we think that's a loss of productivity since they're not at the amounts that they could be after getting the amount of training there. So past that, when we found few suggestions with that. Now, the total cost is going to be, they're very similar, and there is different solutions towards solving the amount of turnover in Champaign County. So it can either be higher wage, but that's something that is not a guarantee that that would entice a employee to want to stay, because they can either, because most of the time private sectors probably pay more, and it's more that it happens in a sense. Or another solution could be maybe hire or get more in benefits in order to saying that they treat you very well and make them that they want to stay at a comfortable location, a comfortable position here. That could be another reason, but it's difficult to say that that would also be a reason for employees to stay. And the third part, maybe cut the cost of training, in order to make it a little quicker, so we can lessen the blow of onboarding training. So that would lower the accounts deficit of that, and introduce a lot less cost of us paying for their training, but that would still cause more turnover in a sense, but where it's less than what it is right now at this current time. So it's more of lessening the blow and just biting the bullet in a sense of they won't be as very efficient since they're not being trained the full amount, but we would still save more money than if it would be originally, since they would leave anyway in a sense. So ultimately the end scenario is it's more of a choice between we should either introduce more wage or introduce a lot more benefits in order to make the employees want to stay and work for the Champaign County a lot longer. But due to a lot of business culture now, they usually keep a lot of government occupation or as a stepping stone in order to get the experience. And that's a cultural thing right now in the business world, where they essentially hop around in different positions in order to keep progressing higher and higher and higher until they are at a place where they are adequate enough. It's not how before in the past where they stayed at one position for 20 plus years. And it can be a culture thing that we can't really change in a sense, but it's more of the best case scenario would be to lessen the blow rather than keep thinking that it's the past, but more of thinking that this is something that would happen, and we should just put in a sense that we have to minimize the loss of work from each worker that would be resigning in any sense. So that would be the presentation. If there's any questions, I am open to answer.
So I have a question. In regards of this culture, you talking about the turnover, the high turnover rate. Me and my son, we going at it back and forth because he keep telling me, Dad, you got to understand the new millennium, because of I guess society is accepting them to build up their resume. Longevity on job doesn't count anymore like it used to. So I don't know. We still debate over that. I was at my job for a quite long time, 31 years before he was born. But anyhow, are there like any incentives or any room for improvement within some of these positions, like the legal clerks or legal secretaries, like any promotion, 1, 2, and 3 different levels?
A suggestion that I would probably think that would be very beneficial for those that want is to provide a lot more incentive towards, like, they can move up very quickly. So I'm sorry if I'm not going to answer the specific position that you were answering, but if you look at a public defender, they can probably think of working more with the attorney general in a sense. So kind of like having the opportunity of moving up a lot quicker in order to let them know that their time is valued and that Champaign County wants them here to know that it's that here is a perfectly fine solution in order to stay for the long term for stability and provide a lot more stability. A lot of people are in today's culture prefer to have this erratic thing of moving to bump up their resume and leave and move for 2 years or so. But probably putting in the culture here to promote instability where things are stable and that you are in no risk of losing your position to another person, or providing that they have room to quickly move up in the ladder. The main reason why people leave most of the time is they want a better position. So we can cut that part right out the equation if that can be something here that the company has to hold for, where they can provide that need of I want a better position locally here instead of them going somewhere else to get that need.
Just because it's fresh, I rode with sheriff deputies on Friday for a full shift, 3 different ones. And so I spent a lot of time asking them, what can we do to keep the turnover rate, which is relatively high. We train them and we ask them to stay for 2 years as part of the training. But then they're getting poached out as trained and experienced officers by some of the little municipalities, the city. And some of the things that seem to be important to this particular kind of employee, which is someone who's skilled, trained, been invested in, that we need, that's a position that can fit in many places. An officer can fit in a lot of different job roles. There's a lot of, it's like a nurse, right? There's a lot of transport. Things that were helping recently was simple, almost cost zero things. They were allowed to grow facial hair, the men were. For some reason, this was a huge perk. There's a lot of little perks that apparently would be great. I found out that all those business cards you watch on all the police shows they hand to everybody, they have to pay for their own as deputies. I don't see why we're not paying for the sheriff deputy cards. And it meant a lot to them they get to take their car home now, and that apparently is a big perk because it's their office and they travel with it. And these things look like they're a low cost input that means a lot, and it was because I sat and I just asked. I'm sure I'm not the first person to ask. You talk about basically you have a 13-month employee when you turn people over. You have this extra month every year. Have you done, or is there data that analyzes if you take that 13-month salary and make it a 12-month salary, how much does it change retention? Is that enough to get people to stay, to make it? I mean, one of the officers is going to retire here. One was relatively new, 5 years. One was here about 15 years. And all of them talked about retention here, but 2 of the 3 I rode with have second jobs that they work. So we have our deputies who work 12-hour shifts now working second jobs. So do you know, I'm sure there's studies out there that show some tipping point where you take, salary X, let's say 40K or 50K, and you make it 10% higher, 16% higher. Where's the point where suddenly retention goes way up? Do you know any data out there on that, or could you find this out?
I believe there are data that suggests that, and a tipping point that could be retention would be probably once they have a lot of the reason would be settling down, not wanting to move or anyway. So, or maybe probably family could be a reason because the multitude of different reasons into that. Like how you mentioned how there is tiny little benefits that seem very insignificant, but towards like them specifically, it can mean a lot to them. That's another reason for retention. So it's kind of like figuring out the person themselves in order to make them feel a lot more valued in a sense, in order to make them want to keep being in here, making feel like part of a team in a sense. So a lot more unification is one way that is promoting a lot more in retention, making it feel valued there. And another could be external reasons. As I previously mentioned, family could be a big reason because that's a very difficult thing. What if they have children, take them to a new school, or maybe in that reason? But there could be many different tipping points there, and I would be gladly able to provide more and search more on my own time in order to kind of understand that out more. But I do not know the correct or the study that suggests like the tipping point of retention where it starts to skyrocket compared to how it is at the moment.
Are there any other questions for Eduardo? If not, thank you. We'll go on to our next speaker on workforce, and that is Kevin Sage. He is from the UA Local 149, and he's going to be speaking about project labor agreements.
Okay. All right. Like she said, I'm Kevin Sage. I'm a business agent with Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, Local 149 here in Champaign. I'm also the president of the East Central Illinois Building and Construction Trades Council here in Champaign. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for inviting me here tonight. I know you guys have a lot of people you listen to and spend a lot of time in here, so I do appreciate you coming and having discussions about these things. So I guess I'll start off talking about project labor agreements. For those of you who don't know exactly what that is, it's called a PLA for short, and it's an agreement between unions and an end user. Basically, traditionally, the unions will say, we will come and we'll do the work for you. We'll bring a skilled workforce. And the end user says, okay, well, in return, we say that we'll use union labor for our projects. So it's just an agreement between the two. It can be made, any way that we want it. We can put in things that the end user wants. Most of the time, for the union side, what they're looking for is to make a smooth project. So what we would like on our side and something like that is to have a pre-job so that all the trades can get together and any kind of problems that we foresee in a project, we would take care of that before we ever got onto the job site. We spend a lot of time discussing jurisdiction, who's doing what the contractors are there. And as far as the end user side, in the agreement, like I said, we can custom build it for whatever the end user would like. Like I said, most of the time it's just an agreement saying that the unions will come in and do the project and have a smooth project, no work stoppages. We're going to bring in skilled labor, and the end user says, okay, well, in return, we do all of our projects using union labor. So, I guess as far as, you hear a lot of arguments against PLAs that it's going to cost more money, that they're expensive. To that, I would say, for a public entity like this, you're paying prevailing wage anyway. Why would you not want to have the most skilled people out on your job sites? And for us, we have apprentices. We have 4 or 5 year apprenticeships. And the apprentices, they make a percentage of what the journeymen do. So you're actually getting kind of a cut rate on apprentices because they come out and they're a little bit cheaper than what journeymen are on the job sites. So I think that an argument saying that it's more expensive, that I don't see any value to that. You hear people say, oh, the unions, they're going to have work stoppages and this and that. Well, that's part of the agreement, is that there's not going to be any work stoppages. We've got PLAs right now with the university, U of I, They work smooth. We're doing a lot of work with them right now. All of it's under project labor agreements. And we haven't had any kind of trouble with them with those agreements or any of those jobs. Same thing with Unit 4 schools, the new schools and all the remodel work, that's all being done under project labor agreements. In fact, I can tell you right now, there's a jurisdictional issue at one of the schools, but because of the project labor agreement, there's no work stoppage and the work continues. And the schools, they don't even see that there's a problem. It's something taken internally that we take care of with the unions. So, I don't know, is there any kind of questions I can answer?
Kevin, I've always felt that within Champaign County, we should try and utilize local labor as much as possible. And it just appears with utilization of a PLA, we're going to be using local craftspeople, we'll be using people that are residents of Champaign County to do work for Champaign County. That sounds accurate?
Yes, absolutely. And then, that's kind of the whole idea of local unions. We use local labor. So, when you're using union labor, you know that it's people that are from your community. They live right here. And, and I know we've talked a little bit about minority inclusion in some of these things. As far as our side, we have no problem at all having language in a PLA for minority inclusion. I think, and this is me personally, I feel like if you can get boots on the ground, people working on job sites in Champaign County that are from Champaign County, I think that's what we need to do. And, as far as the union side on that, I have no issue with that. I think that should be included inside of a PLA.
How are you, Kevin?
I'm good. How are you doing,
Haven't seen
Geraldo?
you in a while.
Yeah.
Do you have any PLAs with Champaign County currently?
No, there are not any PLAs with Champaign County.
Have
That
you-
would have to go through this group here. So,
Because I know that there was some talk prior, many years back, that we wanted to make that every contract that we sign has a PLA agreement. And I spoke with Stephanie Furtado regarding that, and I know that there was a big push at one time that most construction work would go, through the unions, through the PLA agreement. And I was just wondering today, are we using those, and does the county have them?
now I know several years ago I remember coming and we talked about PLAs with the county and to this group here, and I'm not sure exactly what happened, but it didn't. There was no follow through, but it would have to go through this group here, I believe. And we do not have anything in place right now. There are no PLAs with the county right now.
So we will work on that.
I
for
hope
sure.
so.
Thank you.
Unit 4's had a PLA for some time, if I recall correctly.
Correct.
Other entities in the county that have utilized the PLA?
We've had some single project agreements with some other entities, but as far as a long-standing, year-long, 2-year-long, 3-year-long PLA, the university and Unit 4 are the only two that we have long-standing ones with. Like I said, we've had single project agreements for certain projects in town here, but as far as long-standing agreements, it would be those two larger entities.
With the U of I as well, thank you.
Yes. Are there any other questions I can field? Yeah.
Historically, how much of the county's labor has been union labor versus not? I don't know if that's something you know. But.
I don't know a number right offhand. As far as just what I've seen, all of the larger projects are done using union labor. I think there's probably some smaller projects that have been done using non-union labor. I'm not sure what the break is there, but I know sizable projects have been done union. Yeah. Any questions?
I guess, were there PLAs in place for any of those when they happened?
No, we have not had a PLA with the county, as far as I know. As far as I can remember, we haven't. Like I said, I've been in our local for 20 years now. I've been part of the building trades for 7 years, I want to say, and during that time, we've not had any kind of PLA with the county. Like I said, I think it would make sense for the county to do something like that. You know, if you're using union labor anyway, and you want the skilled, you know, the apprenticeship, have these kids that are going through apprenticeships and spending 5 years, 4 years, 5 years learning how to do something and one thing. I think it makes sense to go ahead, if you're paying prevailing wage anyway, to use union labor, and you probably would want a project labor agreement just so that you have the peace of mind that there's not going to be a labor stoppage. You know, we guarantee that if there's any kind of problem, we take care of it internally, and the end user would never see the issues. Yeah,
I
Rolando.
personally know how important it is to have a PLA in place because there has been a lot of labor that has come into Champaign County, and they use day laborers, and day laborers have gotten hurt on the job and have been out of commission, and they have no insurance whatsoever, and they've lost their livelihood because of an accident on the job. And I think it's very important to make sure that, you know, we work with individuals that are licensed, bonded, and insured. So that that doesn't occur, because, you know, usually the day laborers are the ones at high risk. Not only are they cheap labor, but, you know, they stand basically they're prone to accidents because they're not trained, and if they do get hurt, and then they're out of the workforce. So
Correct.
we advocate
And
for that.
most of the union labor, I'm going to say the majority, I would say all, but I can't guarantee all. But what I've seen, everybody has gone through OSHA classes, and that's something you can even put in the PLA too, is, you know, the unions will guarantee that everybody that's on the job site has had safety training, has at least an OSHA 10 or an OSHA 30 card, or whatever the county would like to see in that. Any other questions I can answer?
If there's no further questions for him, we thank you very much for coming.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming here.
Thanks. We have one more guest speaker tonight, and that is, we've got Isak Griffith going to come and talk to us about workforce recruitment and retention.
Although I'm probably more of a There we go. So I'm Isak, and Darlene brought me on board in part because of just simply how the county is structured. So effectively, we have about a dozen independent companies with a dozen different CEOs who all operate very much independently in terms of how they hire, how they promote, what their policies are. Basically, just almost everything operational is determined by the elected official, but the budget is set by the board, and the infrastructural components are provided by the Administrative Services Department. So Administrative Services is largely about infrastructure and common services. So the things that are across the board, the facilities, the IT infrastructure, the general hiring process in terms of payroll, those sorts of things. Those are within Administrative Services. The day-to-day operations is very much a part of the elected officials, or under the elected officials' purview on how they want to handle things. At the same time, there hasn't been for quite a while somebody really providing that HR support to those elected officials. And so the state's attorney's office provides a tremendous amount of legal counsel regarding how to do things, but often that response is what needs to be done and what can't be done. But it's not really the state's attorney's office to provide guidance on how to do things. And so a big part of my role is providing that sort of support to the elected officials. So for example, in my first 2 weeks, I got to help let 3 people go. It's one thing to know exactly what you can and can't do when you hire, when you fire, but it's another thing to understand, well, how do I put, what documentation do I really need? What does it look like? How do I organize it? How do I ensure that I've done everything to protect the interests of the county? Then how do I actually go through the process of letting somebody go? What does that conversation look like? Those are really hard things to do if you've just never had that opportunity. And a lot of our folks who are in management across the county have not really been in a position prior to where they are in terms of hiring, firing, developing personal review processes, developing policies, understanding how policies are implemented on a day-to-day basis. And so as part of the work that she wanted to do as a county executive is providing that sort of consistent support across the county. So it's part of what I'm here to do. With the fact that there are still some interesting challenges when you effectively have a whole bunch of different people who can run their operations the way they would like. And so we're trying to find ways to partner across the county to develop some more consistent policies and procedures, but also more consistent resources so that everyone's getting the same answer when they're asking the same kinds of questions. So it's kind of where we're headed. And there's some interesting challenges, but this is really your time. And so I want to know, I'm curious to hear what you feel are some of the barriers that we have in terms of workforce development and some of the things that you're hoping to see, considering the constraints that we do have as a county. Yes.
Actually, I just have a follow-up question based on the information that we're given on the high turnover rates. Is that something that you're looking at to review further? Because
it's a problem.
It obviously is, and I was surprised by these numbers. I guess I just assumed county jobs there wasn't this type of high turnover rate, but obviously it is a problem. And is it something that you guys are going to try to address? Having one overall person looking at these things might help. Just wondered your thoughts on that.
It really is a challenge, and there are a few departments that are hit by this more consistently than others, but it's a problem across the county. And part of it is generational, but a bigger part really is the fact that we do not have competitive wages and benefits. The county used to have more competitive benefits than are currently provided. And I thought it was a really good question when you were asking about sort of what's that point when people leave. And it's not easy to answer because it would vary very much by the type of work. Right, when you have someone who's in law enforcement who's been training side by side with a team of people, what's going to get them to leave is going to be very different from somebody who walks in making $12 an hour as a clerk. Right, so their needs walking in the door are different, and so the things that make them stay are going to be different. But there's a really good study done not too long ago that was published by NEOGov that really looked at workforce issues in the public versus the private sector, including taking a look at what makes people leave and what makes people stay. And fewer than half of the people who are actively looking for new positions were looking because of wage. But almost 2/3 left because they're offered more money. And so people are looking because often they're feeling like they're not working on competitive IT platforms, they're not learning competitive marketplace skills, or they have an education and the work that they're doing doesn't align with what it is they thought they wanted to do. And so they start looking because of that personal dissatisfaction. But what gets them out the door is being offered more money. And so we're looking at both, as we look at the budget, we have to take a look at where do we have the opportunity to become more competitive. But those are conversations that are going to be really hard for the board because that has to happen within the resources. But there are also things that we can do in terms of making this a better place to work. So here in a few weeks, we're going to kick off a pilot employee assistance program. That's going to be open to county employees and their spouses and their partners and their children. And it provides up to 5 counseling sessions per issue and a lot of online resources, including some legal, like some guidance on how to do personal planning or working with aging families or issues with child rearing, a lot of coupons, so discounts for things if you shop a lot online. So there's a lot of little perks through there. And that's something that people have been wanting, but we haven't been able to find a way to afford to provide. And we're really going to try that. We're kicking it off. We have our kickoff meeting tomorrow. Other things that people are interested in is training. So we've also implemented a training program. We started with before you fire, let's take a look at the documentation that you need before you let someone go. This month we're taking a look at Supervision 101, and that's going to be, it's short, but it's interactive, and helping supervisors understand what it means to be a supervisor, that level of responsibility and the level of self-reflection and self-accountability that's required to be successful as a supervisor. Next month we're going to do something more comprehensive with workman's comp. And we're also bringing in our risk partners to help with that presentation, and they're providing food, so that's exciting. And the training that we're providing right now is being driven by what the managers need. But we're going to be opening it up to what it is that people across the county are looking for, because we also have several partners that provide training. So we're going to be facilitating training through our risk management partner, through our EAP partner, and looking for other really affordable, if not free training to provide people around the county. For the first time we did ethics training. And we're going to, and it's going to be small at first, but we're going to do it twice a year. A little bit of training on fraud and ethics. And we're hoping that as we're working with the department heads and the officials and the supervisors, they're creating a more consistent workplace with more consistent messaging and holding our leaders more accountable so that they're creating more enjoyable workplaces. So it is, right now, that's kind of what we're limited to, is making it a better place to work. That's our job. But we really need the partnership with the board to be able to really fight some of the financial constraints of what we're able to do with the budget. Yes, sir.
So I need some understanding in regards, are some of these county jobs, they union jobs?
Yes, we have both bargaining and non-bargaining.
Okay, so the bargaining jobs, is there like a voice, a group of people or the union that has a say in regards of the employees' rights?
Of course.
Okay, so even with the one you said you had to do some firing, or you fire some few people, who was that? Was that union workers or?
Well, this would not be the most appropriate forum to talk about specifically
okay.
individuals who were terminated,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we do everything by the book, and because there's a liability factor there. In fact, we've been successful in fighting the unemployment claims for all three of the people who were released.
Okay.
Right? You have to follow the process, and we follow the process regardless of whether or not someone is union, because everyone deserves that.
Okay, well, as a board member, I thought a policy chairperson has some kind of say or role in something in regards of the process.
Not to my understanding, based on the structure.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Thank you for spending about an hour with me, and thank you, Darlene, as well, to explain the many layers of employment and the questions that I had that were addressing diversity and that were addressing inclusivity. How do we guarantee, and I know we can't guarantee, how could we set goals to be more inclusive and so that our workforce at the county could look more like this board? And how could you work with the other 12, 14 entities within the county that does their own hiring? I believe that they don't hire through a committee. They hire just as on an individual basis and an application. I know that the federal government has goal 20% underrepresented, 7% individuals with disabilities, 7% veterans. Do we give any pointage or any percentage points to hire veterans that fight for us and are looking for work, and they come to our county, and we want to be able to hire them and give them a sense of leadway in the sense of opportunities and jobs for their families. So how do we guarantee that we have a workforce, one, that's diverse, two, that's inclusive, and how do we advertise and sell that and open that? Because too often we have been accused as a county that, it's a bedroom community. We hire only our, brothers, sisters, mothers, and family, relatives, cousins, and we don't hire anybody else. How do we avoid getting that stereotype?
Part of that, I think, is as a county, we can do a whole lot better job in helping the people in Champaign County understand who we are and what we do. it may be that was the case once upon a time. But even, I do have visibility to most of the folks who are hired. And most of the folks who are hired are really walking in off the street. And not because of somebody they knew, but because of something they applied for. And it's really interesting to see the applications that come through. In terms of those kinds of incentives, the county has never provided that. And to answer some of your question, the simple reality is that the policy committee doesn't constrain the hiring choices and the firing choices of elected officials. They really do have that independence across the county, and that's been a constant factor. So part of it is, is the board willing to offer financial incentives to elected officials for meeting certain diversity? Because otherwise it really is under their purview to determine how they want to do the recruiting. At the same time, since like the job ads come through our office, when they're interested, I have been working with some of the elected officials in rewriting the job ads to focus more on the type of person that they want to hire, not just the job skills. Because when you focus on the job skills, you can limit who's trying to walk in the door. But when you're looking for somebody with a certain caliber, who's at a certain caliber as a human being, you're just naturally going to diversify it. We're starting to take a look at who's receiving the job, the copy of the job ads. And if you know somebody that has access to certain populations that you would like to be more included in the application process, just let us know. We'll send them an email every single time we have a job ad. So part of that is relying on the community to help us understand where to provide access to the job ads that are there. Also, some education for the leadership in the county in terms of how do you evaluate job applications in a way that's fair. The university and larger institutions often have really strict ways of looking at applications, and they can be set up so that ideally it's more diverse, but a lot of times that actually can reduce some of the diversity because of the nature of those strictures. So it could be that we can do some education in terms of how do we evaluate applications. We can even change the application itself and ask different kinds of questions. Most of the jobs that are out there were set several years ago, and the same job ad is being released every single time. If this clerk position is open, it's the same ad that's going out, which means it's going to attract the same people over and over and over. And so there's an opportunity if elected officials are interested in taking a look at changing that. So for example, the sheriff's office was having trouble recruiting for one of their positions, and we worked to completely rewrite that job ad. And they immediately saw an increase in people applying for that position. Right, so there really are opportunities, but that is driven largely by the elected official and creating opportunities. And that's part of what we're trying to work on, is opportunities for the elected officials and for the people who represent them in terms of how can we do business in a way that is more inclusive and more inviting, but also holds people to a higher level of accountability.
Did that position go through the job content review committee or?
The job
board?
didn't change.
The job didn't change.
The job didn't change, the job description
Basics
didn't
were
change.
basically in there.
The job ad changed. Right, because that's really what people see first. It's not the job description that gets people in the door, it's the job ad. And that's what we changed, and that's the impact sometimes, that's the initial impact they can have, significant and immediate changes. So one is just getting more people to apply that represent a broader representation of our community. Yes?
So have you thought about a job fair?
Actually, yes. We actually, at our very last department heads meeting, we talked about job fairs. Some of our departments do it, but as a county, we haven't. And it's going to take us a little bit of time to get all the tools in place. But we're already talking with the department heads on what it would like for us to represent them at job fairs around the community. Absolutely. Yes.
So, you know, kind of folding a bunch of things together, we have this two problems, right? We want to increase retention.
Mhm.
We get people in, we train them, we get them with the same old ad that we put out there for the clerk over and over again. We get them in, and then they bounce out because they bounce out, and we throw the same ad out there. So there seems like there's a lot of work to do there, but there's maybe two ways you could approach. Some of these positions are positions where people are coming in, as you said, basically off the street. We're not paying them a great wage, but we're giving them experience. So on one level, once you get people for a while, you try to retain them with better and better reasons to be here, these top three things here: competitive salary, pleasing work environment, which could go back to the infrastructure that we talk about. Maybe this is a crappy building to sit in all day long. Maybe there's better places for us to be. But then on the other side, embrace the bounce outs, right? There's a lot of people that are really looking for that starting job. So we say, okay, well, I'm doing this where I work with people from Parkland who come in with this 900-hour university thing, and don't model any hiring after the University of Illinois, because the University of Illinois is horrible to hire people. But, Champaign County, a great start. You come in and you work for us for a while. We ask you to stay for a couple of years. You're going to get some experience. You can bring in people, and you're going to find the gems that kind of bubble up to the surface there. And some of the other people are going to go. So you just accept that, and you work with it, and you advertise it. This is a great place for you to start. Are you just out of high school? You're just out of Parkland? You're just out of college, and you're looking for that leg up? Well, we're here.
People are going to think I paid you to ask that.
What's that?
I said people are going to think I paid you to ask that.
No,
Because there really are, there's creative solutions. So for example, one of our departments has a high level turnover. One of the things that we want to talk with them about is seriously considering eliminating one of their positions and elevating the skill level of the entry level positions, so that everybody walking into the department is starting at a higher wage, but with a higher level of accountability and responsibility, right? Then everybody wins. Right, and you wouldn't let someone go. You take that opportunity when you have the vacancy to take a look at how do we restructure this so that we really can pay people legitimately a higher wage and give them a job that they're going to go to enjoy more. Right, so there are creative solutions that we're talking over with elected officials, and we've already started conversations with the other government agencies to talk with them about, let's create an action, let's be very intentional about starting to create career tracks. Our biggest bounce out in a lot of ways is to the city of Champaign and the city of Urbana, because they use a lot of the same software we do, but they pay more. So yes, we get them trained, and then they literally can go and do the same job and just simply be paid more. Right, and so we do need to take a look at how do we pay more, because if there's people we want to keep, we have to be able to afford to keep them. At the same time, it is sometimes in the county's best interest to train someone, have them go somewhere else, work, develop their skills even more, and then come back. And that does happen. We actually have a lot of rehires that people recognize there's a value in the stability that the county offers, especially once you get to a certain level of employment. And then you get vested in the retirement system. And now we'll have the EAP, where there's more personalized individual support, where there are things about working at the county that actually make this in a lot of ways desirable if it's competitive enough to justify. And so part of it is being creative, and how do we find ways within our constraints to pay people more? And sometimes that means paying people higher, but paying fewer people, or other creative solutions, but also being really intentional about creating those career paths. Right? Maybe it makes sense for someone to start in the circuit clerk's office and then go to the county clerk's office and go somewhere else. That we really embrace that. That's actually one of our biggest skill sets. But we want to make sure that we're giving people the opportunity to become successful in those roles, so that when people are leaving, they're not leaving that department bereft. And so we have to be really intentional about creating those career tracks and say, this is a really great place, but you really should be looking at being here for 2 to 3 years, and then here are the things that really would be the most natural stepping stones. And stagger that so that there's the opportunities that for folks who are doing great don't create hardships because of the vacancies. And so part of that is finding a balance for the needs of the people who work here as well as for the needs of the county.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to hear. I was going to ask is, you talk about these 12 little kingdoms, and they're all sort of running their own thing, and they're under this kind of umbrella of the county. But it's good to hear that what you're thinking about is this, not just career pathing through this office, but going to the different places, the different opportunities within the county, in the hopes that either they orbit back or they orbit out and they come in somewhere else. So I think promoting that's always been a big gripe for people that, entry-level people I hire where I am at, is that, where is this it? Is this all I do? I do this, I do this, I do this, then you're going to get someone else to do this, do this. What do I get to do next?
And if you're hiring within the county, there's so many things that they don't have to learn. And so there's a benefit to hiring from within, But we want to make sure that we're competitive so that when people are ready to step up, they have choices other than stepping out. You guys can arm wrestle over who goes in what order.
Several of our topics that we had on our workforce development have been touched on already, some of them very, very lightly.
Mhm.
I would almost say succession planning was what you were discussing there at the
Mhm.
end about leaving, so I counted that as discussing. On our workforce sheet, I think we discussed in some form or another everything except redundancy. So does anyone have any other questions or topics that they think should be added or that they want Isak to address to add?
Procurement and minority business, we have no incentives or no initiatives to hiring minority business, women in minority businesses. Do we foresee that in the future, and how could we improve minority business interrelationship and training?
If you give me the money, I'll find a way to provide those incentives. I mean, really, that's kind of that's a very real constraint. There are incentives, but when you're looking at such a diversified workforce, how do you do that in a way that's also fair, right? The incentives for law enforcement are going to be very different for incentives for custodians. Yet they are both equally very much of value in the work that they do in the county.
I know that Kevin's organization, 149 Local, does a lot of training, and I
Mhm.
know that at the university, Fred Coleman also did procurement training for minority businesses. It doesn't take any money, it's just training how to do the
Yep.
paperwork that that you have to submit to get a contract with the county. It's not any additional money, it's just holding an afternoon workshop or a morning workshop,
Well, but that's
passing
also-
out and going through the application process.
And that's targeted training, right? And part of that is identifying who's signing those contracts, right? That's actually not most of the county. Most of the people hiring in the county, that wouldn't be a conversation for that sort of engagement. That's really a handful of people. And we do, in fact, now have access to that training through the employee assistance program that we're about to take on. That's providing, that's training. They'll actually come in and provide on-site and in person for the people who need that training. And so part of it is looking to you and looking to the department heads to identify what are our pressing needs. We could have 5 in-person trainings for an hour over the course of the next year. What are those top priorities? They will customize training based on what we need. And diversity training is important, hiring training is important, but what else do we need? If we have concrete things that not only do you feel that we need, but we can identify who's the best person who really needs them, we can find a way to make that training happen. Yes?
Okay. Do we have any data on comparably sized counties and their retention rates?
Not on the retention rates, I haven't seen that. And we do on the salary rates, but I haven't really seen a whole lot on the retentions, but I can take a look and see if I can get some information from my peers.
How do we do on the salary comparison?
For the most part, we're low. And no one is surprised by that. There's a few jobs where we pay equal or competitive or higher, but for the most part, we really are low almost across the board.
So, I mean, I know it's obvious when we're losing people from the sheriff's department, we're typically losing them to either the municipalities, police departments, or the U of I, state police, etc. But for the other departments, are we losing those to the cities, or do we know where we're losing them to?
We lose a lot to the cities, or to other municipalities or the townships or other counties. In our highly skilled places like in the assessments office and the clerk's office, our employees are actually incredibly attractive to other counties because they're extremely well trained and they're knowledgeable and they have hands-on experience. And we're a large enough county that we see a lot more of the nuances and the complications and the technicalities more often. And so people who come from Champaign County are sometimes more prepared for some of the challenges that the smaller counties might not even recognize that they need to be prepared for. So our employees are really attractive and really competitive in the job market. They're extremely approachable, yes.
I think it was mentioned in the media, it was last week, that the U of I is looking at revamping their sexual harassment policy.
Mhm.
It seemed like one of the principles was not viewing it as simply meeting the minimum legal requirements,
Mhm.
but establishing a policy that instead just aims to
Mhm.
create a safe environment. Have you looked at our sexual harassment policy, or is that something that you think that might need attention?
To be clear, our sexual harassment policy, um, the one that's on the books is actually technically only relevant to the Administrative Services Department, although it can be adopted by other elected officials. Each elected official is actually responsible for adopting their own policies. Right. And so we're looking at updating, we're looking at competitive policies, we're working with the state's attorney's office. The current draft actually has incorporated language around cultural humility as well, and basic professionalism. Because you're right, that minimum legal standard doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have good employees. And so we want this to be a safe and comfortable and competitive place to work. And that means a certain level of safety and professionalism. So we're absolutely looking at that. And we're working also with the CCMHB and the policies that they have, because they tend to have access to really current policies as well, that are just more robust and a little bit more progressive in terms of employee welfare.
Good, thanks.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's good that, this employee assistance plan looks interesting, and I'm glad we're giving our employees more access to, mental health services and counseling services. And, I saw that additional services under consideration include, more support programs and more sort of
Mhm.
mental health and physical health services, and I think that's good. One thing I'm sort of curious about is, have you explored like partnering with Parkland or something to give our employees discounts on, taking some classes there? Because that's
Not yet.
okay.
And we're actually looking at a lot of different talks about, because one of the things that is starting to be asked more frequently is assistance with formal education. There seems to be more interest in this, at least than in recent past, but it's something that's come up again.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things, are there creative solutions? And so part of it is a little bit more time, mostly for me to learn my job.
Yeah.
But looking at how do our employees further their own personal goals in education, whether it's at Parkland or the university, or some of the more emerging forms of formal education.
Yeah, I mean, I know
Mhm.
I see that a little more in the. I've seen that a few places in the private sector.
We've been talking more with Parkland, more about workforce development in general, and about recruitment and visibility to our positions for the folks at our Parkland. One of the great things about Parkland is people learn really practical skills, and so they're really attractive employees. And so finding ways for their graduating students to look at us more seriously, and that's another place where being more competitive would be in our best interest.
Okay, I'm here to make sure we stay on schedule, and right now we're on schedule. It's your time. If you wish to continue this discussion, is there any problem with people continuing to ask?
Well, and I also want to say that I am available if you do have specific questions, if you do have recommendations. Darlene actually brought me in to support the elected officials, and that includes you. I'm really here about working with Darlene to try and figure out how do we make the county a great place to work. And I really am open to your suggestions, because I only have my own one brain. And if everyone's working on this together, we'll just come up with better solutions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Zach. Appreciate it. We'll conclude